Hello, folks. Welcome back to World War II TV and a rather impromptu Ask Me Anything because my Arnhem guest rescheduled from Arnhem Week is still a bit under the weather, so I'm going to reschedule that for some time later. So I'm doing this because it's Friday evening and I don't have any shows Saturday and Sunday, so to kind of bridge over to Monday when we have 2 more Channel Islands at War Week shows, I'm going to do this Ask Me Anything. So I've still got a bit of a cough, a bit of a sniffle. So if I cough or sneeze, it's because I've got a bit of a cold. Had it about 2 weeks now, but I'll be good. So you know the format. If you're new to World War II TV, thanks for coming along. But in these ones, what we do is we kind of answer questions that you guys post in the comments. There were some already posted this afternoon, although one of the ones that's posted this afternoon I cannot see again, but I'll answer that one and I'll go through the others. So the first one was, and I forget who posted it, was about left-handed soldiers in World War II. Were they forced or encouraged to fire their weapons right-handed? And yeah, the simple answer is yes. You do occasionally see photos of people using weapons with the left-handed way, but generally it was the era it is. I mean, I'm 53 years old. When I went to primary school in the 70s, there were still kids who were kind of being forced to write with their right hand that were left-handed. So of course World War II was 30-40 years ahead of that. So yeah, it was the norm back then. Left-handed kids were kind of forced to write right-handed at school, and so therefore the army had a similar system. Some of the weapons you can fire both ways, but most you can't. So I was reading this afternoon, Spike Milligan, the British comedian and World War II veteran, talked about the fact that in one of the books he talks about the Bren gun instructor saying, we have not yet made Bren guns suitable for left-handed people, so you'll have to shoot it the army way. So that's how it was. Yes, you do occasionally see some photos of people using them left-handed. What interesting thing I found out this afternoon, and I have not found the source of this, is someone did a survey of casualties in the First World War in the British Army, and apparently a greater percentage of left-handed people died than right-handed people. Now, that is really interesting. I don't know that I have any sort of conclusions to be drawn from that, but that was something that turned up this afternoon. Maybe because they're endangering themselves, or they're slower to respond with their weapons. I don't know. They're not as quick on the shot. I don't know. That was something I found. Didn't find any data for World War II, but that's left-handed soldiers. We've dealt with that one. So I'm going to scroll back to the beginning of the question. So Stuart Bertie, who's a friend of mine, who came and stayed with me in June, and also the photographer for the independent company and the We Have Ways Festival, is asking a couple of questions. I'll deal with yours first. So Stuart, it says, your book about Robert Wright and Kenneth Moore tells of 2 medics who show humanity in an extraordinary situation. Are there other Normandy stories that you have been similarly inspired by? And the answer, of course, is yes. Although, interestingly, I can't think of many of them right now. One particular veteran that I was very inspired by was Harold Baumgarten. D-Day Survivor was the book he wrote. He was in the 29th Division, Omaha Beach, was wounded 5 times on D-Day, including a bullet that went through his face and out the other side, and other ones to his arm and what have you. And he was a very inspirational figure. Generally, Jim Pee Wee Martin, the 101st Airborne paratrooper, who died a couple of weeks ago, was another inspirational figure. Stories that from the battlefield that were inspiring. I mean, I'm focusing on your word inspiring there, and I'm sure there are others, but right now I can't kind of think of any. But yeah, definitely meeting veterans and how they were able to put these things behind them. Donald Burgett, who was A Company 506, good friend of mine, was wounded on June the 13th at Bloody Gulch in Carrington. He had a lump of shrapnel hit him in kind of there on his arm, and had a groove in his arm for the rest of his life. And when he was working in roofing in Michigan after World War II, I think it was his wife had to kind of tie a hammer into his hand because his hand couldn't grip because that he'd lost one of the tendons there. So to think about a guy making a living by his wife tying his hammer into his hand to go up on the roof and put in roof nails, that's the kind of thing that when I stub my toe getting out of bed in the morning, I kind of grumble about it all day. And these guys went back with horrific injuries. Bill Garnier, who lost his leg, Band of Brothers, you know who I'm talking about. He was in, physical work for most of his life, worked around the dockyards in South Philly and had sort of carpentry jobs and all sorts of, and the fact he had one leg didn't seem to slow him down. So those kind of stories are very inspirational. So that's Stuart's question done, but I'll do Stuart's second question. And it is, what motivates or inspires you to keep researching, keep bringing your outstanding content to your viewers? Well, thank you for saying the content is outstanding. That's very nice of you. Well, I mean, I want to do it. I'm passionate about doing it, but I'm also, the hard fact of thing is I am 53 years old. I don't have anything else I can do now. I'm at the point now where this is my career. Talking about World War II and the war is kind of where I found myself. I'm not going to retrain and become a horse rider or a jockey or a plumber. This is what I do now. So motivation is to keep on doing something so I can earn a crust, so I can pay the bills and do something I enjoy at the same time. So yeah, it's both passion for understanding more about history, but also it's what I do now, and I'm too old to train to do anything else. So I will keep bringing stories to people. And I foresee the future will be here on YouTube more than on tours, although I will be doing some tours and stuff as well. But whether or not it'll change to another medium at a later date, I don't know. But I can't see myself ever not communicating about World War II. And the fact is, the last 2 years with meeting more historians, my understanding of the war is getting better. But the realization of how much there is still to learn is also getting massive as I go. So I realize the light at the end of the tunnel is getting further and further away. No matter how many books I read and subjects I research, there are more subjects and more books and more depth within those subjects. So it's an addiction, really. It's a kind of good addiction because it's not hurting anybody. But yeah, I'm addicted now to kind of telling these stories. So that's one there. Mark Loop is asking about the 29th Recce Troop. Now, I saw you mention that on a post the other day. I'm not sure what you mean by that, because there's a 29th Cavalry Reconnaissance Unit, and then there's a 29th Rangers Unit. So I don't know of one just called 29th Recce Troop. So do you mean the cavalry one? If you mean the cavalry one, there's Smarter Action Reports online for that. But the 29th Division on Omaha Beach, before D-Day, they had a Ranger battalion that was ended up being disbanded. Jack Womer, who was ended up being in the 101st Airborne in the 506th, had been a 29th Division Ranger. If you buy Jonathan Gorn's book, Spearheading D-Day, there's a picture of the 29th Ranger patch that was worn by those people in the 29th Division. So it was a combination of Ranger training and 29th. Whether that's who you mean or whether you mean the Cavalry Reconnaissance Troop, I don't know. But I don't know much about it. But 29th Recce Troop, not sure what you mean by that. I'll go through some more questions, and then hopefully there'll be some to ask. Apparently Brad had some trouble with his channel uploading the wrong video. That was interesting. That was on this day in Canadian military history. Trying to find the actual question there. So yes, so Dave, the Arnhem program, the Arnhem guest Krista is still a bit unwell, so I'll postpone that to later on. That's why I'm doing a Ask Me Anything. So there we go. I'm trying to find another question. Scrolling down. Yeah, lots of people saying hello. That's great, but can't see any questions. Someone just saying that they enjoy the Channel Irons presentations, and so am I. I'm really enjoying them, and there's two more coming on Monday, and it's a subject I'll return to in the future because I'm finding it really interesting, and I'm glad you guys are finding it interesting too. So trying to get, here we go, from Barry Keenan. I'm so glad to finally make it to one of these. My question is, of all your encounters with veterans on all sides, which one means the most to you? Well, I don't know. I mean, all of them in many ways. What I generally do think about now is how, when I was meeting veterans, and it seemed there were lots of them, how I didn't really appreciate that would come to an end. I mean, obviously, I knew those guys were older than me, and I can think back to when I was in my kind of teens almost, being at Pegasus Bridge when Major John Howard was there, and Wally Parr and Jim Woolwork, and it just seemed normal. And then in the years that followed, you'd get a bus come over of 20 veterans from the same unit on the bus. I did some stuff up at south of Coin Totalized when the Northamptonshire Yeomanry came over, Ken Tout being one, when Ken Tout died this year. And there were like 15 members of the Northamptonshire Yeomanry on that same bus, most of whom had fought in Normandy. And I remember one in Port-en-Bessin years ago where it was loads of commandos who'd all served in the same unit and all served in Port-en-Bessin. And at the time, it didn't seem that remarkable, really. But now I realize how few of those guys there are left. I wish I had embraced it more at the time and enjoyed it as well as tried to do my usual thing of, you know, asking them questions and getting interviews and things done. But yeah, it's I'm now, yeah, looking back on it, I think there are probably way more incredible events that I didn't notice were quite as incredible at the time because they seemed normal. Does that make sense? It's like everything seems normal until it gets taken away from you. Like, you know, members of your family who are, you know, that maybe they eventually end up wheelchair bound. They don't realize there was a time where they did their last walk. My mum is effectively in a wheelchair now, and she said to me last time I saw her, she didn't realize there was a time she once did a last bicycle ride. There was a time when she never got back on a bicycle again. I think that's how I feel with veterans, is that I didn't know there'd be a kind of a last time meeting up with veterans. I mean, I still theoretically will meet a few veterans, but it's changing all the time. So yeah, loads and loads of memorable encounters with veterans. And yeah, I wish I had all the memories kind of formulated in a particular part of my brain, but they're kind of all over the place, and little things occur to me every now and then about yeah, but memories I have. And you know, when they pass away, I think of encounters I had with them, and little things they say, and kind of life lessons. Anyone who's hung around World War II veterans, or indeed any veterans, that kind of ability they to have generally to put on a brave face and just go, oh well, it was, you know, it was what you had to do, and you know, they masked a lot of their hardships and just kind of got on with life. And so I'm inspired by that quite a lot. So I'm gonna go and find some more questions. Andrew Routledge, hi Paul, always love to give you a broad question. Did you know whether British and Commonwealth forces were given tougher tasks in Normandy on purpose, or did it, I guess the second one, end up that way? Well, it's measuring toughness, isn't it? You know, how, I mean, yeah, it's whenever you start making comparisons between beaches or sectors, you have to set your framework up about how you're making those comparisons. So some of the American divisions are facing very, very tough conditions. Some of the British and Canadian units are facing tough conditions. But how you compare one unit's tough assignment with another unit's tough assignment, I don't know. I mean, the Americans pushing up to Cherbourg, for example, on the face of it, doesn't seem as tough as the British and Canadians pushing in towards Caen, because the British and Canadians are up against armor very, very quickly out of the blocks from June the 6th, you know, 21st Panzer and 12th SS. Whereas you look at the Americans pushing up to Cherbourg, the German units defending that area weren't quite as good as the Germans defending the Caen area. But then the speed they were having to move up the Cherbourg Peninsula, you take the 4th Infantry, 22nd Infantry pushing up the right-hand coast there. They're kind of taking on German positions on good high ground ridges. And the 4th Division pushing up to Cherbourg, 24,000 battle casualties in a month from June the 6th to July, killed, wounded, and missing. So you could look at the map and say, well, the mission going to Cherbourg isn't as tough as holding off the armor over Caen, but the guys in the 4th Division pushing up to Cherbourg would say it was very, very tough. And yeah, I see what you're saying. Absolutely, I see what you're saying about the all the armor the British and Canadians are facing in Normandy would seem that their mission is very tough. But yeah, it's very it's a complicated situation, because whenever you're making comparisons, you have to be clear about how you're comparing them. I mean, I did this debate with Spartacus Olsen and Indy Nidell for Time Ghost on their channel. If you haven't seen it, look on YouTube. Did D-Day win World War II? And we were talking about the comparisons of the beaches and how do you compare the beaches? I mean, Juno Beach, for example, as a percentage, more men were killed there than on Omaha, probably. On Saul Beach, a lot of the men were killed away from the beach, pushing into places like Hillman. So how do you compare the landings on the beach? Do you compare the June the 6th losses? And how do you define tough? How do you define all these things? It's very complicated, but it's an interesting question. And yeah, I'll have to think about that one more. Robert is asking, in regards to Operation Market Garden, is there a book of an alternative history if instead of Market Garden, could the British and Canadians have cleared the Scheldt by October the 1st? I don't know if there's an alternative history book. I know there's that Disaster at D-Day book by Peter Surus, who did, I think, in a second book where he took some scenarios and had them go the other way. I mean, clearly, when it comes to discussing Market Garden, it's easy to say now, with the benefit of 78 years of hindsight, what they should have done instead. We should have done this. The plan should have been a month, 2 weeks earlier. Or they should have aimed for the Scheldt estuary. Or they should have done this. Or they should have turned left or not right or whatever. And it makes for fantastic discussions. But of course, because we can't actually look at how any of these other alternative scenarios would have played out, it's all conjecture. It's all, someone can say, well, they should have gone for this, and you could make a case and say, well, in fact, someone said today on one of the comments on one of the Arnhem shows that if 101st and 82nd had moved for the bridges quicker, the operation would have been a roaring success. And it's an interesting claim, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but you've got to prove it. You've got to make sure that claim has water. And all we can do with something like Market Garden is look at what actually happened and analyze that. As soon as you're into, oh, if they had done this, it might have done that, you're adding lots and lots of ifs and mights and possibles and scenarios, and it makes for fantastic conversations, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you can come to any conclusions. I hope that makes sense. Dave is asking, have a sip of beer. Monty Python Holy Grail beer tonight, in case you're wondering. And yes, I do accept deliveries of crated beers if anyone feels like sending me some beer, because I'm running out of English beer here in my fridge. What is the best part of your Normally tours and the worst part of the tours? Well, the best part is being out in historic sites, sharing the stories of sacrifice and courage with people so they understand those days better. That's the best part of Normally touring. The worst part is fitting in with the tourist needs to do things the way they want to do it. The particular sites, people insist. I'm going back into my standard thing about people focusing too much on June the 6th, not enough on the Normandy battlefield or Battle of 78 Days. So I used to love guiding. I still guide a bit. I've done about 25 days of guiding this year compared to back in the day. I've done 120, 130 days of guiding. Mag, my other half, is in the room. Will have done 120 days of guiding by the time the end of the season, I think. So I still enjoy guiding, but I enjoy it on my terms and doing things I want to do. But I think all the guides in Normandy would agree that the average knowledge level of customers seems to be dropping and has been dropping over the last 20 years, whether it's a time thing and a generational thing. But back in the day, I'm sure 20 years ago, you'd meet people and they'd read John Keegan, they'd read Stephen Ambrose, and they'd even read people who hadn't necessarily didn't agree with. I'm not a fan of Stephen Ambrose, but at least it's a starting point for conversation. I think sometimes people these days aren't as well read, they aren't as knowledgeable. They may have seen a movie or two or documentary, so that's changing. But at the end of the day, grumbling about touring on a battlefield is a bit like it's a bit pathetic in some ways, because there are far worse jobs. And my hat's off. I don't know what you guys do who are watching tonight, but if any of you are working as paramedics or coal miners or truck drivers or in any one of many innumerable jobs, you're dealing with a far worse job than I am, and a tour guide is. Talking for a living on a battlefield that you enjoy being at is a pretty cool job. So yes, tour guides will grumble about it every now and then, because everybody grumbles about their job, but really it's a very, very great profession to be in. And earning money for just talking about the past is pretty cool. So that's it. And Maggie is in the other room. So bonsoir, Mag. She's in the other room there. What have we got in way of questions? Zachary Westhoff is saying, I always feel like a big picture that is missed in many war discussions, how hard it was to win against the German army. All our technology advancements and logistics were required to overcome. That's a bottomless pit in terms of a question comment, isn't it? Because it brings up that whole thing about Allied equipment versus German equipment, and then you end up in the two sides of that argument where all the people now are saying all the German stuff was amazing, or the other is all the German stuff was shit, and conversely, all the British stuff was shit, and all the reality, of course, is both sides had good stuff, they had bad stuff. They both sides were trying to evolve their equipment as they went on. I think these days we're realizing the British and Canadians and Americans are actually going up a steeper learning curve. And although they have got equipment that isn't working as well, they do seem to cure those things quite quickly. The Germans, I think, maybe aren't, but then that's again a very blanket statement. And I'm, people say no, the Germans are very good at adapting and stuff. But the fact is, I mean, what we cannot question is the fact the Allies won, the Germans lost, and the Allies did win. So I think when everyone talks about how good the German stuff was and how poor the Allied stuff was, it wasn't so poor that it stopped the Allies winning. Now, maybe the Allies could have won a year earlier or done it with less casualties, but the Allies did win. So I think the equipment wasn't that bad. Paul Fast Bites. My grandfather was on HMS Rodney. He told me that they destroyed Panzer tanks with its massive guns. D-Day. He said they had the exact location supplied by Bletchley Park code breakers. Is there truth in this? I don't know. I think you're mixing up various things there. I mean, certainly there was a lot of information that had been derived from Ultra that was used by the D-Day planners about the strength of German units. But most of the stuff in terms of what the targets was from aerial photos more than Ultra. So the picture the Allies had of what they were having to face on D-Day was mostly from aerial photos, plus information from French resistance. The information we're getting from Bletchley Park was more about the higher level, about German divisions that would be coming to the coast as reinforcements and what changes were made at kind of a corps and army level. But certainly HMS Rodney or HMS Dave, as me and Colin call it, because if you don't understand that reference, it's because Only Fools and Horses, the British TV show, Trigger always called Rodney Dave. So me and Colin refer to HMS Rodney as HMS Dave. It's not a very funny joke, but it's our joke, and we like it. So yeah, there's a bigger question there that we could look at, but I'm not going to delve into it more. Is it much more expensive going to Normandy for D-Day? Yes. If you want, hotels will put their prices up for the June the 6th week. Tour guides don't tend to put their prices up, but they are booked up very early. But yeah, hotels definitely will put their prices up for the June the 6th period. Ferries even will put their prices up, things like that a little bit. So yeah, D-Day is not the June the 6th week is not necessarily the best time to visit Normandy. Although it might be in a few years' time when there are no longer veterans attending, maybe that time of year won't have the draw it did when you had the chance of meeting veterans. So what came of your video game reviews, David? I just haven't done any recently. I tried doing some reaction videos, thinking I might kind of find a new audience and they would maybe go viral and get hundreds of thousands of views. And they got a few thousand views, but not anything special. It's just a question of finding the time. It's a good opportunity to kind of just tell you again, without getting out my little violin for sympathy, is just how many hours a week I put into this, and just sometimes how my files of emails between me and potential guests reach dozens and dozens of messages just arranging one show, because they ask how the format will be and I tell them this and then they say that, then we negotiate this and they say, can we do a PowerPoint? I go, yes, and I give some ideas and I give them links to some shows to watch. Then they send an image and I make a graphic for YouTube and so on and so forth. And then I have a guest that I want to have on a Thursday, but it turns out they can't do the Thursday. So I have to negotiate with another guest saying, I know you said you do Tuesday, but can you do Friday instead? And so on. And that takes an incredible amount of time. All the listings takes a long time. The making of the graphics takes time. Me researching and prepping for shows takes a lot of time. So I do those little reaction videos were kind of a flurry of things I did when I wasn't particularly busy with other things. But now, as I'm planning the winter schedules, I've got 8th Air Force Week is coming up in a couple of weeks' time, and then I've got 2 weeks on El Alamein coming up, and I've got another 2 weeks in January about Stalingrad, but not just Stalingrad. And as I'm getting to work with historians who aren't necessarily friends first, it takes longer, the organization, because I have to tell them who I am and what I'm doing. In the early days, when I was just using lots of people I knew, they knew me already. I didn't have to say, look, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. But as I'm spreading out the reach, and hopefully you guys will appreciate how wide a net I'm casting to bring guests in, is that when I contact these guests, they have no idea who I am and what I'm doing. Some of them do know who I am and what I'm doing, but I have to explain who I am and again, what I'm doing. So that takes time. So I'd love to do more of the reaction videos, and I will do some. It's just finding the time. I keep getting asked and suggested that I should download my shows and make little short 5-minute versions of them to put on TikTok and things like that. And it's a really good idea, and I'm sure it would really work. Again, it's just the time. It is to as Brad knows, who's watching this, anyone else who's doing any editing, it takes time. So if I were to download one of my hour-and-a-half shows, I reckon it would take best part of 3 or 4 hours to condense that to a 5 or 10-minute thing, and then I have to edit it and get all the thing and then upload that again. So if I'm doing 5 shows a week and I want to make a 10-minute version of each of those 5 shows, I would say that's probably 3 or 4 hours work per 10-minute highlight. So times 5, that's 2 or 3 days work. I haven't got 2 or 3 days. So time is the main thing. I love doing everything I'm doing, but it's time. Yeah, so the cavalry, Mark. So yeah, there are some 29th Cavalry Reconnaissance troop after action reports online. I saw them earlier, so have a look for that. But I don't think it's a very large unit, and I don't know much about it myself. So there we go. Susan is saying how she supported Jersey War Tours. Thank you. And yes, if you didn't see the show with Phil on Monday about Jersey War Tours and their incredible job scanning all the bunkers and Atlantic war positions in Jersey, go back and watch it. And if you have watched it but have not yet gone to the Jersey War Tours website and seen all those 3D scans yourself, do it. It should be really good, because it's just great. Questions are coming in fast now. Good. Do you have a memory that stands out of touring people around Normandy? Yes, lots of them. And without the thing, this is where I don't want to appear to be a grumpy old curmudgeon. Most of the tour guides, the people you remember are the weirdos, the ones who are just odd, or they ask ridiculous questions. The majority of people, 99% of people I've ever taken on a tour of Normandy are lovely people who have an interest in history. You have a good time with them, and at the end of the day, you or the week, whatever it is, you part on good terms. You say thank you very much, but in a way, 3 months later, you've forgotten them. And I don't mean that in a harsh way. It's just they go in, I've taken about, whatever it is, several thousand people on tours over the last 20 years. So the people you remember, there's the weird ones. And I won't tell you the stories because it would descend into a kind of a look like Woody just taking the piss out of customers. And it isn't that. But there are stories tour guides will tell in a pub about the customers they've had that are the memories, and that's the funny ones. Of course, the other memories are just on a similar to veterans is taking people. I've taken a lady to where her father was killed, and he was Canadian, and there's a possibility that her father was killed either by artillery or possibly in a murder. And I forget the exact unit he was in, and Brad's ears are probably pricking up as I say that. But anyway, I've got permission to go to this barn where her father had been killed. And it was very moving, taking someone to where her father was. I've taken men to where their fathers were killed or wounded, life-changing wounds. So those kind of things are amazing. All that. So there's both funny memories of working with customers, and there's those classic moments of being able to take someone to somewhere special to them. So there's all sorts of things. Ian Carr looks like it's a good question there. Should the Allies have selected Utah Beach with the difficulties cliffs, or maybe reviewed the 6th beach at the East End that was later not used? Well, no cliffs at Utah. Utah, the problem is the isolation and the floods behind. It's an interesting question, a really interesting question, because I'm going to have a sip of beer while I ponder it. Is the reason for including Utah is to move up and secure the deep water harbor at Cherbourg, which I kind of mentioned earlier. Now, in the end, I think, and some historians will probably agree with me, that the whole folly of sending 4 divisions up to Cherbourg, that's the 4th, the 79th, the 90th, and the 9th, and the 79th. I say 79th. Anyway, those divisions was probably a waste of time because the Allies had hoped to get to Cherbourg within a week. It took 3 weeks, and by the time they got there, the Germans have sabotaged the harbor, so it took several weeks to get back up to even a minimal amount of cargo unloading, and never was able to be used to the capacity they wanted to. So the Allies ended up unloading all their supplies on Utah Beach straight off LSTs and what have you, and Omaha on the Mulberry for a week, and then after that on the beach and Gold Beach and what have you. So now you could definitely make a case that the time spent sending the troops up to Cherbourg was a waste of time. And in fact, if those 4 divisions had been committed to the push towards Saint-Lô instead, and just, you know, like they did in the Pacific, let the Cherbourg garrison wither on the vine, just cut off the peninsula. So the first bit would be as normal. The Allies would race across the Cotentin Peninsula, get to the other side, and then just siege the Germans out. Let the Cherbourg, you know, the German defenders starve themselves out. Now, if they'd done that, then those divisions could have been used for the 7th Corps, that is, could have been used to attach to 5th Corps and push on towards Saint-Lô. So maybe the Allies would have got Saint-Lô early, which means maybe we could have done Operation Cobra early, which means totalized and tractable early, and blah, blah, blah. So that's why Utah was chosen, because of getting to Cherbourg. But as for using Band, the other, which was the beach that was abandoned from the other side of the Orne estuary, that got abandoned, scrapped as a plan pretty early on because of the terrain difficulties inland from Band Beach. So Utah, yeah, the reason for having it seemed important at the time to get to Cherbourg, but may not have been worth it. And obviously, the big problem was the isolation from the other 4 beaches, because although Utah and Omaha are about 12 miles apart by sea, they're about 25 miles by road. So it meant the 7th Corps are very isolated there. Whereas if you take, for example, Gold Beach, there are Americans a few miles to their right, and there are Canadians a few miles to their left. So they're not quite on their own like the troops on Utah were. So that's interesting. I think I'll move on at that. Because otherwise we spend too long. Robert is asking, I enjoy your Pacific War shows. Yes, I enjoy the Pacific War shows as well, because it's an area I don't know as much about, and I enjoy doing them. And yeah, so I will do more of that. Adrian, not wanting to sound weird. No one sounds weird here, but could you ever consider coming over to Blighty to meet up with your subscribers? Well, I was at the We Have Ways Fest in July, so I met quite a few people there. I will or probably be attending another couple of history festivals in the UK next year. I may end up doing something exclusively for World War II TV, maybe. Again, it's time. If someone said to me, and I'm not putting this in your corner, Adrian, if someone said to me, look, Woody, I'm thinking of organizing an event in the south of England for World War II TV subscribers there, and could you come and attend, but I'll do the organizing of it. I kind of go, yeah, sure. It's just that I haven't got the time to organize it myself. So I'd be very happy to do something if someone else took on a bit of the organizing, which is what the independent company do with We Have Ways of Making You Talk, is that there are people organizing these get-togethers. Obviously, that's a much bigger, more supported podcast than I am, but yeah, feasibly, I'm happy to go to things. I just haven't got the time to organize them. What else have we got there? From Scott Grimwood, another regular viewer. Do you foresee virtual tours gaining traction? Yes, I definitely see that will be a big change. It was one of the things I talked about on the panel discussion with the Time Ghost team last week or 2 weeks ago. I think there will be in the future an ability to go to battlefields like, I don't know, the Battle of Breville, where the 6th Airborne were, or Lafayette Bridge, and there'll be the ability to kind of put on a headset or something and look around and see the floods as it was at the time, see the artillery position, see the foxholes. I can see that happening. I would love to see that in the future. So that'd be cool. I think virtual reality will be. And yes, Operation Torch. Yes, I will be doing something Operation Torch next year, and that's in fact my plan for 2023 is to tie up much more with the anniversaries. So So picking up Torch and Husky and things like that, and try to devote a week or two to those events when they happen. And the same thing in 2024 when we get in line with 44. I kind of missed the trick in the first year of this in 21. I could have done more 80th anniversaries to things of 1941, but I was still finding my feet on the channel. But it doesn't mean I won't be doing won't be doing 41 content anyway in the future. I can always wait to the 90th in 2031 and do that. But yeah, definitely be doing some Torch stuff next year. Can you film the river areas that the cremated dust ashes dumped in the river? I don't know what that means. Sorry, I just don't know what that. I don't know what that means. Gary is asking, can you identify any specific previous combat experience or experiences, amphibious or otherwise, that inform the D-Day tactical plan on Omaha Beach? Not specifically. I mean, obviously the 1st Division had already done Torch, but then their commanders have kind of moved on and changed. People like Terry Allen have come and gone. Roosevelt's gone to the 4th Division. So I'm not sure that anybody was really putting a 29th Division certainly weren't using much. I think at a higher level in terms of the organizing of the Navy, you can definitely see some learning from the earlier landings. But I think when it comes to Omaha Beach, a lot of those plans were just put together by the units that were in the UK. The 29th have been there for 3 years, whatever it was. So I don't think much consideration was made to the previous tactical plans. And I think, I'm not sure how much that value would have been, because Torch is different location, different enemy, different terrain. I'm sure the Navy side of things, the aviation plans, I think took more of what was done in early operations. But I think in terms of getting the ground assault in, I don't think there was much done. Sean is asking, can you give us your top three D-Day story as men or units? Oh my God. It depends what I've been doing and reading about at any one time. I mean, particularly with my mate Colin, we've been doing a lot more work on the British Commandos recently. And the Commandos that people do know about are Lord Lovat's men landing on Sword Beach, pushing in to move over Pegasus Bridge and go up to the airborne sector. But that's some of the Army Commandos, and that's only number 4, 3, and 6 Commandos. I think some of what the Royal Marine Commandos are doing, 46, 48, 41 Commando, that's becoming more interesting to me as well. So commandos that were kind of doing the linking up between beaches, I think, is an area that I'm very interested in. I'm definitely less interested these days in the 101st and 82nd as I was 10 years ago, because I'm kind of not bored with it, but I spent a lot of time touring those areas, and people who are obsessed about 82nd, 101st, and I'm kind of less interested in that now, although I still will read about that. So other specific stories about D-Day, it depends what I'm reading about, depends what I've been. But I haven't actually done much D-Day reading recently, because I haven't done many D-Day shows on World War II TV for a while. So I haven't really picked up much new stuff recently. I mean, I still find some of the old favorites, because we're putting getting more information out. So things like Pointe du Hoc, Pegasus Bridge, there's still information being worked out. There was a big discussion on Twitter recently about where and what type of vehicle, German armored vehicle, was knocked out near Pegasus Bridge, which is the one you read about in all the books about Pegasus Bridge. And Stephen Fisher and Ben and Main and various others were getting involved in this conversation. And that's fascinating, that an event that we think we kind of know about can still be debated. They're still debating what vehicle was it, where was it knocked out. People are using aerial photos and they're looking at all this kind of information. So some of the stories that we think we know are still proving to be more information to be sought about them. There's still work to be done. So yeah, lots more things. Antoinette is asking, what's the most interesting subject you've done that you've learned something new? And again, it all depends what I'm doing that week. So right now, the channel lines, I mean, that's but I love it when I have moments where I get facts that just completely blow my mind, and I can't think of any particular moments like now, but actually one of them, I did a show with an Australian historian about one of the infantry units that he called it the Australian Band of Brothers. And Mark Johnson, historian's name was. It was about 6 months ago, maybe actually more than that now, probably a year ago. And it was about these Australian soldiers who were in Tobruk in North Africa, who were receiving letters, anonymous letters from Australian citizens, because Australians were aghast that these Australian soldiers were out in Tobruk and were not defending Australia, because Australia was still under the threat of an invasion from Japan. And the way the Australian worked with their units is that the volunteer units could stay in Australia. So the ones that fought in Kokoda, they're Australian militia, because Kokoda was part of the Australian territory of Papua New Guinea, that it was counted as being at home. So the regular army units could be sent overseas. They ended up in Tobruk, and these soldiers in Tobruk would receive little packages from Australian civilians with like white feathers in them, saying you're a coward because you're not defending Australia. And yet they are defending Australia indirectly by helping to defeat the Nazis, which is part of the Axis. And that was a mind-blowing moment when you realize there's some digger sitting in a digger, I mean an Australian term like Tommy, sitting in a shell scrape being shelled by the Italians and the Germans in Tobruk, who's getting a letter from somebody he doesn't know. And it's not him personally, it's to an Australian soldier accusing him of being a coward because he's not defending mainland Australia. That was a moment that kind of blew my mind. So that was interesting. And Great Dominion is saying, how do you quantify toughness? Going back to that question about the British check to the American, defining what the toughness of a mission, tough by the risk, tough by the number of Germans you've got to deal with. All these things is too complicated to debate. So Rob Crane is saying, I'd only recently discovered World War II TV. Nice to watch with a bottle of wine. Which video of the back catalogue would you most recommend or proudest of? Oh, I don't know. All of them, really. I mean, that's like saying what's your favorite child? You know, I mean, on the one hand, I like tackling things that people think they know about and trying to have a new angle on them. So something like Normandy or Market Garden or, the 8th Air Force we've got coming up in a couple of weeks' time. So people think they know about that. They think they know about the strategic bombing. So come up with something that people don't know. But I also like the weeks where I'm tackling a subject that people know very little about at all, like Romania at War Week, which didn't get incredible views because it was a bit obscure. But for me, it was all new because I know so very little about Romania at war. So I kind of like that. I like all of them, really. I've had no shows I haven't enjoyed doing at all. And I've always learned something, even if it's a subject I thought I knew. So I kind of like them all, really. Andrew's asking, do I have a favorite Spike Milligan book and why? I mean, the first of the military series. I mean, Adolf Hitler, My Part in His Downfall is great, and Rommel Gunner Who, which number 2 and number 3 is really good. But I also like his poetry books as well, and I like the script of The Bed Sitting Room, the post-nuclear comedy. There was a film of that. That's a good. The script of that is good, but I can't like anything Spike Milligan wrote, really. I wish Spike Milligan had actually written a serious study of the Tunisian campaign, even under Terence Milligan, under his real name or something, and had no jokes in it at all, and just written a campaign, because apparently when I did that show with his daughter Jane, he'd got all the after action reports, war diaries, he knew all the movements, and Peter Gaddick Adams said, he quoted from Spike Milligan's, memoirs in his book on that campaign. So I think I wish Spike Milligan had written a proper serious World War II book. Although, as we said, his comedy books about World War II serve as informative books about the campaign as well, because you're laughing and you're learning at the same time, which maybe would be better. And if you don't know who Spike Milligan is watching this, folks, if you're American or Australian, Spike Milligan was a post-war British comedian who had been in the British Army in World War II and was a satirist, a comedian, TV comedian, a writer, actor. Look him up. Amazing figure. So, yeah. Any thoughts on doing something on the Chindits? We've done a couple of shows on the Chindits. Tony Redding was the historian about a year and a half ago. It was really an amazing show about the Chindits. More about what the men endured rather than necessarily the validity of the Chindit campaign, because that's, again, you get subjects like that where there's the military angle of, did the Chindit campaigns do much to bring an end to the Japanese conquest of Burma? And the answer probably is no. Is the study of the Chindit campaigns fascinating? Yes. Is the bravery of the men and what they endured, suffered, worth learning about? Yes. So it's that separating the two angles there. It's like some of those early commando missions that may not have been very successful, but they were very, very important for morale. They showed the enemy that we hadn't given up and that we were doing stuff. So yeah, that definitely will be going back onto Chindits in the future. Can I do World War II veteran interviews as part of your channel? I have done a couple, but I won't be doing that anymore because they're too old. And frankly, it was never what I wanted to plan to do. So I did one. The last one I did was with Lucky Luckadoo, so it was an 8th Air Force survivor with Kevin Mara, who did the book on him. I did a Pearl Harbor. So we did a Pearl Harbor survivor. I did a couple with Alan King, a British tanker. But frankly, it's too late. If I had started a channel 30 years ago, if YouTube existed 30 years ago, interviewing veterans when they're in their 50s or 60s might have been valid, but there's plenty of interviews on YouTube with veterans, and if that's what you want to watch, and I've watched a lot of them myself, then that's fine. I think the problem with interviewing elderly men and women is the memory, how memory works. I want to try and investigate history from the historian's point of view, and although I am intrigued by what veterans say, and I've met lots of veterans, actually interviewing them and making that my history doesn't really interest me. So I've let other people do that. And there's loads of great websites of interviews of veterans. So it's not something I kind of want to do, really. So there we go. Would you consider writing another book? I have considered writing a book. And when I did Angels of Mercy about Anglo Plan, I said it was Normandy Battlefield Chronicles #1 with the intention of doing some more, and I haven't. And honestly, I don't really like writing. I mean, I find it very difficult. I find this talking to you much easier than writing. I find the process really hard. I hate the editing process. I don't mind the research work, but actually I don't think there's any point me writing, because I think I'm better at doing this, and I'll leave the writing to the Peter Caddick Adams and the John McManuses and the Ian Tolls and all those people who do it much better than I do. But what I think I can do quite well is this. So I think there's no point to do that kind of thing. Asking about working with Krista Bergstrom. Yeah, I mean, as soon as Krista, when we get one show done, because I know Krista's done stuff about Air War and Battle of Britain and Eastern Front. Yeah, we've got to get the Arnhem one done first. And then, assuming that's going to be a great success, I'd love to work with Krista again, because I think he's a really interesting historian. So, yes. Have I ever been to Ramon's headquarters in Normandy? The Chateau Roche-Guyon? No, I never have, actually. It's one of those things I've never done. I've been near it, but never been there. And people do go there, and yes, it is worth a look. There's not much to do with World War II there. They don't have much about it, but yeah, it is something people do, and I haven't been there myself. So, 101st Airborne Attack and Camp. We've done that. Several shows about Carenton and 101st Airborne. Look for them on the channel. Mario, excuse me, burped there. It's the beer coming back. Purple Heart Lane. We did that one. And there's the one about the Easy Company attacking Carenton. So we've done 2 or 3 things about Carenton in the past. Let's see some more questions. Here we are. Didn't know Juno was worse than Omaha. It all depends what you mean by worse. This is this difficulty of making comparisons. In terms of fatalities on the beach, the percentage of men killed on Juno was probably higher than the percentage killed on Omaha. But the percentage wounded on Omaha was probably greater than the percentage wounded on Juno. And certainly the force of men landing on Omaha was considerably twice the size, in fact, of the force on Juno. So when you get into worst, greatest, toughest, it's so hard to frame those questions, because you've got to set your parameters up. So yeah, worse in some regards, in other regards, not worse. It is just what it is. So yeah. One World War II area that gets relatively less attention in Western circles is Eastern Europe in general. Well, we've done quite a few Eastern Front weeks, Mapina 089, and we will be doing more Eastern Front weeks again. It's a good opportunity. While I've got you here, is the way YouTube works with listing shows is not quite how I would do it. It's all in playlists. That's how you do it. You can't, it's not how I would want to organize my videos. So what you have to do is you have to go to my channel, click on the playlists thing, and then look for the kind of playlists that I think you might be interested in. So there are playlists for countries. So you'll find New Zealand and Australia at war, or Canada at war, British Army at war, whatever. Then there are ones by country. So there's a Romania country, and there's France at war. But then there's themes like armor, aviation themes. So there's 590 something other shows in the World War II TV catalog. So you can either just go back chronologically by clicking on past streams, and it takes you back as I did them, or you use the playlists to find what you're looking for. But there are several Eastern Front shows. There's maybe 40 Eastern Front shows at least there, with some renowned historians like Prit Buttar, David Stahl, others there. So we have done Eastern Front content. We will be doing more Eastern Front content. Neil Lawrence, my old mate from Suffolk. Yes, I would like some Adnams or some St. Peter's Ale, Neil. Yes, and you managed to get onto the chat again. So Neil is one of those guys I've known for a long, long time, along with his twin brother Steve. And Neil is one of those incredible people who was working with the medical authorities all through COVID. So when I was talking about guiding not always being perfect, there's someone like Neil who's been at the sharp end of the medical health profession for many years. So his gripes about what he does for a job far more worthy than my gripes about being a tour guide. So there we go. My tours, World War II, D-Day Historian is my website for my tours, so www.ddayhistorian.com. I do a lot less than I used to, but I'm doing 2 week-long tours, one in April, one in October, and then a few private tours during the course of the year. There is some stuff there. Nick is watching, who's on did the Channel 9 show yesterday. If Lathbury had allowed 1st Para Brigade to start setting off as soon as they could, rather than wait until all 3 battalions had reached 95%. You see, we're into Market Garden things. I mean, clearly, there's lots of people who could have done a little bit more at Market Garden. Urquhart going off and getting lost for a day and a half when he wasn't with his division was a bit of a mistake. The clear delineation of command and the 3 routes to the bridge and not focusing on what. There's lots of things that we can discuss about where Market Garden went wrong, and we will be discussing that on future shows. So we'll do that at other points. Yeah, Mag is saying it is the best job in the world being a tour guide. So yeah, it is. Don't dwell on the gloom. Some days you come back and go, oh God, but most of them are fantastic. It's a great job. Can I invite Derek S. Zumbro on to talk about his book, Battle of the Ruhr Pocket? I had never heard of that gentleman, so I will add him to my list. Yeah, sure. If I can find contact details for him, if I can find out what he's done, yeah, sure. I'm always looking for new guests. I've got an amazingly long list of potential guests, but that's another good idea. Well, there's a good question from Nick. Which veteran do you wish you could have spoken to? It simply is more Germans. Not necessarily specific Germans, but more Germans. Just to get their understanding. I mean, I reckon I've met about 2,000 World War II veterans in total. Maybe 20 Germans out of that, maybe a bit less. I mean, as a percentage, it's tiny. And no, I'm the first to, say that the clean of Wehrmacht myth is a myth. The Wehrmacht, the Kriegsmarine, the Luftwaffe were all complicit in the atrocities of the Third Reich, and I get all that. But at the same time, I would like to have understood more about the Germans' experiences, perhaps in the Battle of Normandy or elsewhere. So, yeah, speaking to more German veterans. In terms of Allied veterans, I didn't get to meet Sidney Jarry, who wrote 18 Platoon, a famous British book about the Somerset Light Infantry. Would like to have met him. What's his name? Who wrote the Flashman books and George MacDonald Fraser. Would like to have met him. And yet, normally, yes, I am a bit roomy. I've got this cough and cold for a couple of weeks now. It's not quite shifted. So yeah. Dave, here's a question from Dave. Who was the best Allied commander and the worst commander in ETO? Well, I don't like the worst game because even when they're having bad days, they weren't trying to have bad days. I mean, we're into that complicated subject about Montgomery is a dickhead, but he did what he did well, mostly. Guy Simmons was a bit of a dickhead and did some of the stuff he did quite well and sometimes didn't do it very well. Best and worst is I like learning. I like having my notions challenged. I like learning more about people like Bradley and Mark Clark and others. And Hodges, I think, doesn't get talked about enough. And the US 9th Army commander, whose name has completely sailed out of my head, which proves my point about him not being very well known, I think is not talked about. The best and worst. Yeah. Was there an episode dealing with but no, I've not done an episode about that. That's obviously something very specific there. I haven't done anything about Boulogne. I haven't done anything about German artillery, so there's a potential future show. Have you led tours outside of France, or perhaps in Germany or Italy or in the Med? Not really. I mean, I've taken for paying tours, so actual with customers who are paying me to be their car. I've only done Normandy. Taking other people around in terms of friends, yes, I've done some stuff in the Ardennes and Market Garden and Saint-Nazaire and things like that, but not really. I've always been a more Normandy guy. What's your favorite French chocolate bar? So that's Armour is benched there. That's the one half. That's Matt, one half of Fighting on Film. There's a white chocolate French bar called Galac that I quite like. Kind of like a bit like Milky Bar. And then there's another one that has hard caramel, salted caramel inside. I think that's a Lindt one. That might be Belgian that I occasionally buy. So caramel and chocolate. But I kind of like my Cadbury's. I like my English chocolate a bit. So I don't really like dark chocolate much. So I don't eat much French chocolate. Brill Channel, great job. Which is the battlefield that you've connected most? Arnhem, bizarrely. Even though I live in Normandy, even though that's where I make my living and make my home, it's the Arnhem battlefield that I think has always made the hairs in the back of my neck stand up. The underpass, the little tunnel under the railway line where the whichever brigade it was, my brain's failing me. Try to get escaped. That's an amazing place. Staying on the bridge. But then there's lots of battlefields I haven't been to. So I reckon if I was to get to some of the battlefields I've now talked about, so if I could ever get to Volgograd, Stalingrad, or I've never been to Monte Cassino, for example. Malta was a pretty cool place. Standing in Malta was really good. What is the most recent book you have read, and do you have a favorite top 3? So I read Sheer Misery by Mary Louise Roberts recently. She's coming on the channel in about 2 weeks' time about the experience of the British and American and Canadian souls in ETO. That was a really swift book, 250 pages. I went through that in a couple of nights. That was really good. And I read non-World War II. I read The Cellist of Sarajevo last week, the novel, and I'm reading another book about Sarajevo now because I went to Sarajevo in July with my brother-in-law who was there in the French United Nations. So I'm reading about the 90s in Sarajevo a lot at the moment. And I'm halfway through Robert Kershaw's book about the Germans at Dunkirk because he's hopefully coming onto the channel also next month. It is next month, October tomorrow, isn't it? So that's it. But and there's another book I read recently, but I've forgotten what it was because I just go through them at such a rate. There was another one I really enjoyed. It's top, but always changing what I'm doing. Will I be doing more about the Pacific Theatre? You betcha. Yeah, with 2 shows next week that were ones that had to be cancelled. So Will Iredale and Phil Weir are coming on to talk about the British Royal Navy anti-kamikaze actions, and John Bruning is coming on to talk about Race of Aces. So that's 2 shows that had to be postponed, and there will be more Pacific content in the future. What topic is most frustrating to research? I don't think there's anything that's particularly frustrating. It's just when you get dead ends. One of the things as a tour guide, people would, you'd have a story that you've worked out that has a real beginning, middle, and end, and you kind of start it there, and you go, and you have a as a tour guide the reason you're telling it, because you're trying to make a particular point. It supports a subject you want, a point you want to convey. It supports the fact that the British were determined, or that the Germans were, whatever it is, and you've managed the tour story to do that job of fulfilling the need you have for it on the tour. And people start saying to me, "Oh, those stories, they're brilliant. How you connected all those things? How you made?" Yeah, because you're seeing the results, the ones where all those loose ends came together. There are lots of times you start working on a story, either for a tour or for your own use, and you can't find out the name of the guy, or you can't connect it, or you can't work out how he got from place A to place B, and there's a big gap in that story that prevents you using it because you just don't know the full details of it. So it's those kind of ones. So it's not a particular topic. It's when you get up to a point with a story where you cannot bring, like an open case in police terms, that kind of, you nearly got there, but there's a vital detail that you can't find that would bring it all together. So those can be frustrating, but you just move on and find something else to do. What else have we got? As Brad says, yes, a YouTube channel takes so much time to do. So I'm gonna try and get some more questions. If you were in the military in World War II, what job would you prefer to be in, and which job would be the last on your list from a survival standpoint of view? So definitely, I wouldn't have ever been a paratrooper or a submariner or in a Sherman DD tank or anything like that. They're too claustrophobic, or anything that involved heights. I think if I had chosen something, I'd have found something kind of creative. I could see I'm quite good with like ideas and things, so I can imagine me kind of being involved in, I'm not an engineer, but like gadgets, or kind of the way of, like the putting of maps inside board games for prisoners in Colditz, that kind of thing. I could see me being involved in that kind of deception work, because I kind of think I'm quite inventive, ideas guy, so I think that would be quite good. Would you ever consider having a show with you and Colin talking about your experiences doing tours in Normandy? Me, Colin, and Mag, and Colin will be on again at some point. We've got to come up with a subject for Colin to actually do, because Colin is a really, really good military historian and tour guide and friend, and I haven't used him as much on the channel as I should do. I have to have subtitles up to put his Sunderland Irish brogue on, but I should do that. And yes, you're right, Fergus. These questions and answers are good and should require less prep. Yeah, they do require less prep. And weirdly, they seem to get good views. Just me rambling about fuck all seems to get as many views as me bringing on a historian about a really interesting subject. So that's interesting. Niels, you've been bringing in some seriously big names, Paul. Very, very impressed by that. Yes, there are some big names been on, and there are some big names coming up. I convinced Jason D. Mark to come on for Stalingrad Week, who is an incredible, renowned Eastern Front historian. So yeah, and I've had very few people actually turn me down. I've had sometimes where I don't get a reply, either the message doesn't get to someone or it goes in their spam folder, but I've only been turned down like 3 times or something, so which is quite good. What are your concerns about Stephen Ambrose books? They're shit, basically. I can't put it much. No, I should quantify that. Stephen Ambrose was a good writer. He managed to make you want to find out what's happening next. So books like Pegasus Bridge, Band of Brothers, was it Wild Blue Yonder? They're page turners. The problem is he was a bit of a liar. I mean, his Eisenhower biography, he claimed how he'd been great friends with Eisenhower for many years. It turned out after Ambrose's death that he'd only met Eisenhower 3 times or something. So he got a bit too big for his boots. He exaggerated things. If he spoke to 10 veterans and 9 told them a version of the story that was, we ran over the hill and we attacked the Germans and there were the Germans, but there was a 10th account where it had a somehow exploding something rather special tank that did this, or there was some moment of something, he'd put that version in. without necessarily checking it. He always went for the sensational side of things. So we're still dealing with some of his legacy. There's a famous story about British. It's a famous false story, I should quantify. Of a landing craft on Omaha Beach, where the British landing craft coxswain refused to take the boat in, and the American sergeant had to pull a cut 45 and put it at this British LCA commander's head and say, "Take it into the beach, or you'll." And it went in. Well, it never happened. And Robert Sales, who was an American GI in that landing craft, spent the rest of his life telling anybody who listened, this never happened. I don't know where Ambrose got this story from. It didn't happen. It's not true. The flotilla commander who was responsible for that LCA flotilla said it never happened. So Ambrose had a habit of putting stuff in that just wasn't true. And then there were plagiarism issues. And it's interesting that he does seem to have been summarily dropped by universities and like that. You know, you look at the reading lists for universities and war studies things, Ambrose just isn't there anymore. Whereas 30 years ago, he was like kind of first name on all the lists in America and in Britain. He's been rapidly superseded and replaced by John McManus and Rick Atkinson and other people like that. So Stephen Ambrose was a good writer, but not the greatest historian. And yet, just to defend him a bit, without him popularizing history in the way he did, he got people reading about history who didn't normally read about history. So there's a generation of Americans and Brits, who are perhaps a bit older than me, who kind of read all of Stephen Ambrose's books, The Victors, Citizen Soldiers, Band of Brothers, blah, 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 who discovered World War II history via his writing. So because of that, we owe him a debt of thanks for getting the industry of without Stephen Ambrose, there wouldn't be a James Holland, there wouldn't be a Peter Caddick Adams in some ways. You know, he was the first superstar World War II historian. But yeah, wasn't a very good historian. Now, there's a very good question, MRK. Do you have any plans to delve into what was happening on mainland China during World War II? Yes. In, I think it's November or is it December, I'm devoting 2 weeks to the Japanese-Chinese War. And some amazing guests coming up. Richard Frank, who wrote Tower of Skulls, Rana Mitter, some historians from China and Japan, hopefully going to be lined up for that. So 2 weeks of programming about that. So that'll be covering both the pre-World War II part of the sort of 37 Shanghai, all that kind of stuff. The massacre at you know the place, brains fail. Covering that, Flying Tigers, so some of the aviation stuff, going right up to the Chinese involvement in Burma campaign. So yeah, there's 2 weeks coming up about the Sino-Japanese war. Yes, good point, Magali. If anyone is watching today or watching this after it's live, who likes what I'm doing and has experience with social media, I am in dire need of someone to help out as a community manager, help out replying to comments, help out promoting stuff on Instagram and Twitter and sharing stuff and doing little, you can cut little clips out on YouTube and do things like that. If anyone's out there who understands what I'm doing, who understands World War II and like to give me a bit of help, please let me know, because I would bite your hand off to get some assistance with this. And thank you, Norma, for acknowledging the fact I'm trying to give other interesting topics some spotlight. I've had guests from 27 nations so far on this channel, and if Krista had been on today and he's unwell, he would be 28 because he's Swedish. I don't think I had a Swede on before, so I'm trying to really bring people on who have different points of view and different things to say. British part regiments are forgotten after D-Day, or some disappear into brigades. I'm particularly in the Gloucestershire Regiment. There's a plaque, their losses on the Bayeux Cathedral. Yeah. Generally, scratching my head, the independent brigade, so the 56 independent brigades, that's the Gloucesters, Essex and the South Wales Borderers, when they become absorbed by the 49th Division, they don't get much of attention. Some of the independent armoured brigades as well don't get much of attention. It's like John Buckley's amazing book on the British armoured divisions in Normandy is great, but it's about the armoured divisions and doesn't cover the armoured brigades. So John is busy teaching at Wolverhampton. I'm sure he's got other books in the pipeline. But yeah, there's definitely an underexplored aspect of studying some of these independent units. Same with the Americans. Not so much of a thing with the Canadians because of a smaller smaller army, and they didn't really have the independent brigades in quite the same way. Well, they did a bit, I suppose, because there's fourth Armored Brigade, isn't there? Anyway, but the Americans, like some of the independent tank battalions, some have their own. Some have got historians who've done books about them, some haven't. So, at the 70th Tank Battalion, there is a book. The 741st, I think there is a book, but the 743rd, there isn't. So, all these units, whether they're British, American, Canadian, whatever, they need someone to be the ambassador for them. They need someone like Ronald, the Dutch guy who wrote about the Rifle Brigade, who's been on my show a couple of times. They need people like that who do the work to focus on one particular unit. And there are many, many units that have not been covered. So, yeah. If you were to recommend just one book to your viewers, what would it be? Oh, my God. I've done a few book review shows on my channel. Go back and look for book reviews. Shattered Sword by John Parshall and Anthony Tully about Midway is fantastic. David O'Keefe, his Dieppe book, One Day in August, is a fantastic read. Rana Mitter's book, I just mentioned him about, I forget the title, it's about the Sino-Japanese War. I can't think what it's called. It's a fantastic book. There's just so many. Sporting is asking, hi, Paul, you have a good number of followers in Italy. How important was the Operation Fortitude North, fake invasion Norway, and Fortitude South? Oh, unbelievably important. The deception campaigns were arguably more vital than the actual day itself, in that on June the 6th, the Allies achieved complete tactical surprise when they landed on the beaches there, partly because of the radar being knocked out, partly because of weather, but partly because of the Germans falling hook, line, and sinker for the deception campaign, thinking there was a bigger invasion coming in Calais, Fortitude South or Norway. So they're incredibly important. Is there a World War II subject you haven't covered but need to cover? Yeah, lots of them. I mean, huge amounts of them. I mean, I haven't done anything on Finland yet. The Winter War was going to do that at some point. It hasn't happened yet. I really want to cover, and it will happen at some point. I've got a historian lined up. For example, the West African units. Incredible. There was a movement north made by the King's African Rifles, I think it was, where they went like 200 miles in 2 days on foot or something to engage the Italians. There's some amazing stories about the African units in Africa and then later on in Burma. So that's there's so many areas. Oh, I mean, Hungary in World War II, haven't we covered that? Abyssinia. Oh my God, there's some amazing stuff happened in Abyssinia in 41. I haven't tackled that much at all. Huge amounts of stuff. Favorite monuments in Normandy. The Green Howards Monument in Crepon, that is often called the Stan Hollis Monument. It isn't actually meant to be Stan Hollis, but it's a British soldier sitting on a bit of a stone wall above all the men of the Green Howards who lost the names of those who lost their life. It's like the antithesis of the Iron Mike statue. The Iron Mike statue at Lafayette is an American being all American, as James Holland would say, with kind of perfect teeth and square jaw and with his Tommy gun nestled under his arm there, looking all heroic, about to lead the charge. The Green Howards Monument at Crepon is a British soldier sitting on a wall looking absolutely fucked. He's looking knackered. And I love the fact it's just that he just looks like, he's holding his rifle. And you know that when he gets the order to go on, let's go. But he's got his helmet off. His helmet's in his hand. And he just looks, he looks weather beaten and tired. And I love that. I love the representation of the misery and the fatigue of being a soldier. It's not all about the square-jawed hero running out over the hill. It's about the misery. And so the Green Howards statue in Crepon is probably my favorite, but there are others. People agreeing about Cherbourg as being a bit of a folly and a waste of time, so that's good. What else have we got there? Cutting the peninsula required wearing out the Germans already, so we're talking again about Cherbourg and that. So yeah, I think just cutting off the peninsula and forgetting about Cherbourg would have been, with hindsight, the best play. But hey, it's easy Monday morning quarterbacking, isn't it? So there we go. Any chance of a show of the 3rd Armored Division attack at Villa Vossard? Yeah, probably. Yeah, I've got a 2nd Armored Division show coming up at some point, and I will be doing some more 3rd Armored stuff with General Dan. I forgot what his name was. God, it's 500 and something guests. He wants to do some stuff. I was in Villa Vossard 2 or 3 days ago, actually. So yeah, definitely do that. So yeah, no, we're in agreement, Niels. We do need Utah but maybe not go to Cherbourg. Is that what we're saying? I think that's what we're saying. Yeah, lots more stuff to do. Found your channel about 2 weeks ago. It's amazing. Thank you. I was in the Marines from 2011 to 2015. Thank you for your service. And now I'm in Army 11 Bravo here at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii. Your Pacific Pearl Harbor videos are great. So thank you. And thank you for your service and good. So brilliant. Would you ever consider touring a group from around here, around a certain company? So yes, I love doing that. I've done that kind of thing before. I love following a particular unit. That's right up my street. That is. I've done a few of those. I've done a couple. The few tours I have done this year, pretty much been bespoke tours, following individuals or following individual units. That's what I really enjoy doing. So yes, definitely. Another sip of beer, and yeah, Torch. Yes, no. So when we said we're going to do some Torch stuff next year, I won't be doing in anniversary with the actual landing, because they're November and I've got other things I'm doing, Al Alamein and Sino-Japanese. So what I'll be doing is early 43 is I'll be picking up kind of the Tunisian campaign and going back and talking about the landings for Torch, but then doing it later in the year. The problem is that you have this congestion of lots of things happening at the same time, like well, yeah, the case in point being El Alamein, and then Torch coming in after that and things. So you get this congestion of lots of things happening at the same time. But I'm in this for the long run, so I will be doing Torch stuff, but I'll be doing it after the events and not. So there's some of the later shows in the Torch week will be covering the later campaigns after landings, but they won't be in the anniversary of the landings. Does that make sense? I think so. Is there a chance of getting Roger Cirillo on the show? Cirillo, I don't know how you say his name. I think I have tried to get him, and I don't think I got a response. I think. I can't remember. And Dan Hill's virtual battlefield tours are very good. Yes, they are very good. Well said there. This is a good one. Yeah, that's exactly correct, Dominion. The Tunisian campaign was in 43, but Torch was in 42. So yes, we'll be going back and acknowledging Torch when we get. So sometime maybe March next year, we'll be covering Tunisian campaign, and we'll go back during that week and look at the landings themselves in November. Does that make sense? Edwin is asking, did I understand from your time goes discussion that the parachutist trapped in the church Saint-Maurice did not actually occur, but is made up to enhance awareness of the action? Well, I did a 2.5-hour show on this channel about it with Marty Morgan about a year ago. In a nutshell, there's very little evidence to say it happened. So when I say I don't think it happened, I can't prove it didn't happen, because you can't disprove a negative. I don't think it happened. I think it bore out of the Stephen Ambrose, Cornelius Ryan, interview with John Steele, who said he had landed on a church tower, and it became a thing, and it became a thing in the movie, and the villagers and everyone else hooked onto it, and it became this big iconic thing. But I do not think it happened, but I cannot prove it didn't happen. Watch the full show for more details, really, but I don't think it happened. Do you have any recommendations for neglected or forgotten locations with a drive or an hour of Bayard? This is an interesting question. Because I see it all the time on Facebook. People will say things like, I'm thinking of going to Normandy. What are the best places to go and see? And people list museums. And I'm always thinking there are lots of places people should go and see, but you have to know what happened there to make it worthwhile. So unless you're with someone who can tell you what happened, a lot of the best locations are just fields and roads and junctions and things. So yes, there are definitely lots of great neglected and forgotten locations. But if I sent you there without you knowing what happened there, you'd go, well, why has he sent me to this crossroads in this village? The point is, it needs the work to put into it to understand what happened there. So generally, if you're coming to Normandy, I recommend the Battleground Europe series, the little short paperback books. There's lots of them that have some really good, interesting driving routes. There's like for example, there's one on Saint-Lô. In the Saint-Lô, when there are 4 or 5 driving routes you can do at the end that take you to some obscure places. So yeah, there's lots of places to go, but you've got to know what happened. Favorite show you've done? I don't know. I like them all. There's very few I haven't done. I really like the one with David O'Keefe, the third Dieppe one, when we had the footage taken in Dieppe a couple of weeks ago. That was really cool. And we were doing it on the anniversary, and Alex Black called in at the end. That was really good. Yeah, well, all of them really. Was the German decision to evacuate Bayeux after D-Day a close decision out of character? I'm not sure the Germans did evacuate Bayeux. The Germans never had much of a presence in Bayeux. It was only kind of Feldgendarmerie and a couple of, I think, a couple of small kind of military police units. I don't think there was ever a really big garrison here. I mean, obviously, when you're looking at the British and Canadian and American landings, is the two beaches where the Allies took the longest to get off the beach were Omaha and arguably Gold, and so the Germans have committed their reserves, the 352nd stuff, up to the ridge behind Gold Beach, the Mauvain Ridge, for example, and the Americans Germans pushing up towards Omaha. Is that they've now committed their reserves to try and hold the beach. So there's no logical sense to try and hold Bayeux. It was far better for the Germans to pull back, or rather not advance further forward, and pull back and defend the Tilly-sur-Seulles area. So I don't know there was any particular pulling back from Bayeux. Any idea why two regiments from 1st ID and one were 29th were used in Omaha instead of all three regiments? Well, it's two regimental combat teams. Omaha is big enough to have the 29th Division and the 1st Division landing each have a regiment up front and then two more regiments in reserve. It was always planned to be a 2-division or 2 regimental combat team attack. So, but it was at the same time. I'm not sure quite why you're getting 2 from the 1st and 1 from the 29th. The first regiment of the 1st Division was the 16th, then followed up later on by the 18th and the other one, 23rd. And then the 29th was the 116th, followed up by the 115th, followed up by the 175th. So both had one regiment up front, and then there was Engineer Brigade as well. Then the other 2 regiments were coming in later on. So it was equal-sized forces. How were soldiers selected for the Pathfinders? Are we talking about airborne Pathfinders? Or I guess we are. We're not talking about the aviation Pathfinder. It was voluntary, basically. Whether it's American, British, or Canadian, it was pretty much voluntary. You were normally already a paratrooper, and then someone said, we are now taking volunteers for Pathfinders. And with the 101st Airborne, it was Frank Lillyman was the captain in charge of Pathfinders. And a friend of mine who went through Pathfinder training and was with Pathfinder, Bob Sechrist, when Frank Lillyman went to his regiment in 101st, said, we're recruiting now for Pathfinders. He said, you're going to be volunteering for something where 1 out of 3 of you only will survive. 2 out of 3 of you probably won't be coming back from this. So Lillyman said, look to the men to your left, look to the men to your right, and consider that 2 out of 3 of you won't be coming back home. So that was how. And Bob Sechrist decided to join the Pathfinders anyway. So as far as I know, it was always voluntary, but there may be some exceptions to that. Speaking of 23, 24, we'll be doing more Italian campaign. Definitely doing more Italian campaign when we get there. Yes, definitely. Absolutely. And Romania War Week was a great week. It wasn't very popular with the viewers, but hey, I enjoyed it. Ever thought of doing First World War stuff? No. Basically, Fergus, no. I stick to one thing. I'd rather do World War II. Well, there's no point in me moving into World War One. Just no point. Have you received any feedback from military organizations regarding the value of your show for professional military education? No, not really. I know a few people have shown them to cadets and things like that. I know people are looking at them, but no, not officially, not anything. Good evening, Ross, by the way, and thank you very much for your contributions. But no, I have. Well, apart from you, Ross, you have kind of said some stuff, but no, I haven't really. Although I haven't tried to find out what they would think. I haven't ever marketed or targeted military units. I've never sent people, I haven't looked for people doing staff rides and said, hey guys, look, here's what I'm doing. Look at my video. So maybe I should do more marketing on that. Do I include POW camp locations at all? Not really. I mean, there's one that there was continental enclosure number 19 was up behind Utah Beach. As I drive past it on a tour, I will say there was a prisoner of war camp there. Lots of Germans are held there, but that's about all I say because there's not much to see. And the POW side of things, although interesting, isn't something I talk about on my tours because there's always other things that I think are more important to talk about. Mark Loop is saying my personal favorite shows are the personal stories. Yes, one of Phil Lamison was a great one. Yeah, no, I like the personal stories. I like all of them. I like sometimes I like in a week how we have a show where we're talking about one person or one air crew. Then we have a big, more expansive one when we talk about tactics and strategy. I like the combination. I like the fact that in a typical theme week we have macro and micro examinations. I like the mix. I wouldn't want to do a channel of just talking about individuals, and I wouldn't want to do a channel of just talking about tech. I like the fact we do everything. I like the fact that we will talk about statistics of Soviet casualties with Nigel Askey was a great show. And then we'll do one about the individual experiences of a particular person. I like that combination. That's good. So I'm going to stop fairly soon because I'm going to have to cough myself stupidly. The coughing coming up. Some good questions there, though. Michael Bentine has not got the recognition. Yeah, one of the original Goon then left. And yeah, Michael Bentine, Potty Time. Yeah, another incredible guy who served with World War II, who had a lot of experiences. And yeah, Lorelei is saying Angels of Mercy was excellent. Thank you very much, Lorelei. And writing is difficult. You're right, Brad. And video editing and writing are very difficult processes. Yes, it's all difficult and it all takes time. And you know, this is the easy bit. That just waffling on about this is really easy. It's the work behind the scenes. This one, I thought I'd skip over that, and I thought I will do it. My verdict on Patton's generalship. Patton is someone I've never really. Just when I've convinced myself that he's quite good, I read about one of the shit things and I go, oh, what the fuck? And so I swing with Patton. I swing, and the pendulum swings. You know. Dramatically. I mean, the show we did about Task Force Baum, you know, his abortive attempt to go and rescue his son-in-law. If you watch that show, I'll read about that. No matter how much you like Patton, if you watch that, you go, what an idiot. And yet there are other times you think that's pretty cool. You know, that the turning of his army to go and relieve the defenders of Bastogne was pretty cool. So Patton is interesting and complex, and I think we're in an era where we need to label these people and say this guy good general, this guy bad general, and it's never that simple. It's, you know, if I was to say to my Canadian viewers, Norma and Brad, Guy Simmons or Simons, however people say his name differently, he's a complex character. There are things he did that were done quite well, and things he did that weren't done so well. Like a lot of these figures we would now identify as having things like Asperger's or autism. They're not very empathetic towards human beings. Montgomery comes into that category. So most of these complex figures like Patton, you can't sum up their career in a he was good, he was bad. There were moments where he was good and there are moments where he was bad, and he's a very interesting, diverse figure. You know, we can't ignore the fact that people like Patton were anti-Semitic, and as many people were then. And so we need to allow for a more complicated response to these things, because you can't sum them up in a soundbite. Sean Brennan, is there any area you would be interested in covering more but have difficulty finding English language stories? Yeah, China, Japan, definitely. Look forward to that. Experience or Indian troops, Pakistani troop involvements, African, anything where it's even France. Ridiculously, even though I live in France, I've only had like 4 different French guests, and one of them was Mag, because they feel it. They feel their English isn't very good, which is ridiculous because their English is way better than my French. But even finding French historians is not easy. At what point did Beachmasters go ashore, and where they were most and least effective? Well, there weren't Beachmasters on every beach. The Beachmasters, particularly, is a British and Canadian thing, and it's particularly Sword and Juno because of the beach being narrower. It was about managing the beach, because they knew on those beaches when the tide came in there was limited space, so the traffic management, so to speak, was way more important on those beaches than perhaps it was on Utah or Omaha. So you don't really see beach masters there, although the Americans might say they called them something differently. And there are technically beach masters on other beaches, but maybe the ones that we know about are Sword and Juno because of the beach being smaller. So that's where they're most effective. Are you interested in learning about World War II? Not really. No. I've got like a bookshelf of that many books, you know, on World War One. You know, I don't know, 15 books. I've Alex Churchill's books I've got on Passchendaele. I quite like them. I've read a bit about Gallipoli. But I haven't got time to investigate First World War. So no. Are you going to do a program about similar to Villa Bocage and other attacks with a camera crew? Well, the camera crew stuff, of course, good opportunity to mention that. Excuse me, take a sip of beer. As you'll notice this year, I've done very little of the way of the live stuff with cameras. And the fundamental reason is that was possible in 2021 because all the people I know in Normandy who are tour guides had nothing else to do because we had COVID. Now, all the tour guides who would be my camera crews, including Mag, are working like crazy. So Mag is, I think, worked 22 days out of 30 in September. So Mag, the last thing she wants to do, quite understand, when she gets back from a tour, is me send her out again in the evening, do more filming for me. So the ones with live footage will be less in the future because of getting people to do the work for me. And also because, as you know, we had problems with the stream quality and connections going. What I tend to do now is I go out and I take the footage in advance. So when we did the one with Arthur about Verrières Ridge with the Canadians about a month ago, I took the footage like a week earlier and we used that footage during the show. So the live ones we don't do. But yeah, again, when Normandy comes up as a subject, I will do some ones in Normandy again. I've done some with Ross in Ross Cable. We did some ones in where Brian Farrell was on site in Singapore. We did some there, so we will do some live ones. But again, it's the time. The live ones with cameras on site, way more things that can go wrong, way more issues with connections, weather, dropouts. So I enjoy doing them, but they involve a lot more planning, and things can go wrong. Am I still planning on doing a get-together festival in Normandy? Probably not. I mean, I'm doing my week-long tour in April, another one in October. But again, it's just finding the time. If someone could help and organize a June event, I'd be happy to be part of it. I just haven't got time. This is a really interesting subject. I want to do a week at some point about neutral countries, so Sweden, Switzerland, Spain, Ireland, Turkey, and Thailand. Explain how there's all different types of neutrality, from neutral to effectively supporting the Germans to neutral effectively being a kind of an unofficial ally, and then in between where they genuinely didn't get involved at all. So there's all the levels of neutrality that would be interesting. More questions. We're an hour and a half in now, so I'm not about another 10 minutes, and I'll stop because I'm getting tired. Susan, yes, the David Harrisfield Virtuous Wehrmacht show was a really good one. About that was what I really enjoyed doing. Can you sign up for tour? Yes. I mean, we haven't advertised how we're going to do it yet, but go to my website, ddayhistorian.com. We are going to be doing one, but we haven't worked on it yet. That's a good idea, Great Dominion. A week on traitors, turncoats, and defectors. That would be really good. Lord Hor, Quisling. Yeah, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? There are other people I can think of and ones that were kind of on the bad side in World War II, then worked for different forces, like what's his name, the German commando, Skorzny, people like that who fought for one lot in World War II, but then did other things after. Yeah, that's a really good week. Are the criticisms valid for Monty's delay in committing forces to move on and take Caen valid? Simple answer, no. Complicated answer, maybe. Caen is a huge, big subject, and it means, and we have to then, it's all about parameters. What do we mean by Caen? Do we mean getting to the outskirts of Caen? Do we mean getting into the city centre? Do we mean getting to the ridge of high ground beyond and setting up airfields? So Caen is not. We have to be clear what we're talking about with Caen. It's a big discussion that would make a really fascinating one, but I'm not going to do it all today because we just get bogged down. And that's a good point, Norma, about judging a commander we always judge them by their worst days, not by their overall performance. And most commanders have some really bad experiences that we kind of beat them with a stick over, and that's it. Woody, what's your vision for World War II TV? Keep on going, get more views, get a little bit more money from it, so I can relax a little bit and replenish my savings that I whipped through over 2 years with COVID. I haven't got back to an even keel yet. As I've said repeatedly, I could go back to guiding full time and make more money easily than I'm doing now with this. But I enjoy this, so I'm going to keep on going. So I'd just like to nudge me up to another little level, double the number of views, get to maybe 50,000 subscribers, even maybe get to 100,000 subscribers. The revenue would then increase, and I could just chill and relax and keep on doing this without worrying about the bills. So that would be the vision would be for the World War II TV to be to earn me a solid income, as opposed to it being just enough to tick over. I mean, I'm not grumbling, and to all my patrons watching, thank you very much for being patrons, and thank you very much for being YouTube channel members. But if a few more people did, it would take me to that level where I wouldn't have to worry quite as much, and I could maybe think about having a social media manager and things like that, and maybe even paying someone. Channel ports, there's another big conversation. Hey, Brad, we could do that. We'll do that one day. We should talk about that. And railway guns will be a good show. I mean, you should see, Niels, my list of show ideas. I keep a Word document on my desktop, and it's just insane. It's like 5 pages of just of a, and it's not just show ideas. It's always a show idea with a guest. There's no point having a show idea unless I have the guest to go with it. It's getting insane. I mean, I've got so many ideas, and yeah. I have interviewed. Ludo is asking. I have interviewed locals who experienced the war in the past. Again, I'm not interested now in interviewing anybody who was there. It's too many years have passed. They're too old. I'm going to leave that to someone else here. If I could go back in time 30 years ago, interview people 50 years ago, that'd be great. But no, I'm not going to do that. Do I have a favorite battle to learn or talk about? Well, it's whatever I'm doing right at the moment, whatever I'm researching this week. So right now it's Channel Islands, because that's what I'm talking about. In a couple of weeks' time, it'll be El Alamein, because that's what I'll be devoting on. So whatever I'm working on right now is my favorite battle at that time. El Alamein is something that I'm getting into again now, because I've got 2 weeks of programming coming up. And Pat, any update on another neutrality program? Yeah, well, we just said that. I'd love to do more about neutrality. Again, I am guilty sometimes of saying to people, I've got the idea for a show, and then that show doesn't actually happen. But it doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It just means it goes into the list of shows I will be doing in the future. And then I think, oh, hang on, I'll do that week, and then I'll do this week. And, and sure, like I said earlier, this year, 2022, I've missed lots of 80th anniversaries I could have covered. I could be covering Torch in November, but I'm doing El Alamein and the Sino-Japanese War, so I can only be in one place at one time. So yeah, I am guilty sometimes of saying I'm going to do that on a future show, and it hasn't happened. But it doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means it's on a big list. So I've been on. Ukraine Ed is asking about the Yalta conference. Someone asked me about doing a week on conferences, and it's worth considering. You could do you could do not just Allied conferences, but even German ones. You could do the Wannsee conference, so the Heydrich Final Solution Conference, and Yalta, and you could do a week on important cabinet meetings of World War II, important leadership meetings. That would be good. I agree that Hershey chocolate is awful. I don't know, and for any Americans who are watching, I do not know why you would put that stuff in your mouth. It's like gravelly, gritty stuff that just to me tastes of vomit. I don't know why you would ever want to eat Hershey's. It's just horrible. Will I be at the 80th year? No. Don't. Well, maybe. I don't know. Possibly. Maybe I will. Have I been to Bastogne? Yeah, I've been to Bastogne a few times. Yeah. And not recently. But yeah, I've been to Bastogne a few times. Mary Louise Roberts, What GIs Do, really good book. And yeah, she's coming on my channel in 2 weeks' time to talk about sheer misery, and we can mention What GIs Do. She's a historian I really admire. I like her kind of challenging views of things. It's been really good. So yeah. Malta's been amazing. What did the 507th do in the war? So the 507th were involved in. They were one of the 3 regiments in the 82nd for D-Day. They hadn't done Sicily or Italy. Then they joined the 17th Airborne and do Market Garden with 17th. The 507th. I would only do one jump with the 82nd. Then they do Market Garden with 17th, and I think they are part of the 1st Allied Army, Allied Air Command for varsity. But yeah, 507th did Normandy, Market Garden, and I think they did varsity, didn't they? Did they do varsity? Yeah, I think they did. More talks on Norway. Yes, there will be a Norway week at some point. Again, there's another week that is on my list that I said I was going to do at some point, and it just hasn't come up. But yeah, there will definitely be a Norway at War week, but I don't know will I be bringing Christopher Bergstrom on Torbes Ardennes? Probably, yes. I've got to get him into the Arnhem show first. As soon as we get the Arnhem show done, then I can have him back again. We had some email issues. I couldn't get in touch with him for a few days, and yes, at some point he will be on. I'm gonna wind it down in a minute because there's a few more questions there. Have I ever played tabletop war games? No. Is a simple answer to that. No, I've got friends who do that. Never have. Pam saying Paul's Ask Me Anything shows are amazing. Yes, they are. Thank you. Amazing because I always think I'm not going to have anything to talk about, and then in the end I talk about lots of things. Although viewing numbers are dropping off now. It's like he's been gassing now for an hour and a half. I'm going to go and do something else. People are thinking, so I will bring it to end a bit later. Yeah, I'll do one more question or one or two. Talk about Ambrose, talking about this, that, and the other. No more questions. Will you cover pre-World War II event? That is a good question. Yes, so only if it directly connects to World War II. So we did one about Spanish Civil War where we're talking about the development of armored tactics. That was with Pete Blanchard. We did that one, and I said we're doing the Sino-Japanese War, so we will be covering the 37 war, but also the 39-45 stuff. So, but only be doing pre-World War II if it directly connects to World War II. So I don't think we'd be, for example, covering. I'm trying to think of an example of something like the Italians in Ethiopia, for example. Maybe not, because is there a direct connection? I don't know. We'll see. Any more questions there? I love you find speakers other than just the famous ones. Yes, that's very important to me, Lorelei. I want it to be understood that you don't have to have published 20 books and be a New York Times best-selling author to be on my channel. You can just be a student or an amateur with a website or a social historian or a passionate enthusiast. It's important that the range of audience of guests is broad like that. So yeah, of course, the big name authors are great, but I like having people on who are just interested and knowledgeable, but not necessarily qualified. Mason Stewart, do you think some of the specialized colonial units, Moroccans, Gurkhas, are underrated? Yeah, well, they're interesting. You can never overrate the Gurkhas. Gurkhas are probably the most amazing force, man for man, that ever taken part in combat. I think we are moving, thankfully, away from an era where they're written about with very bad language. You read books about the British written by British officers in the 1950s about the 40s. And although they're very complimentary about the Gurkhas or the Indian troops, the language used is very, very awkward, very clunky by today's standards. They're not, the terms they use, the racial descriptions of them, that it's not very PC. So I think we're in an era now where we would not use the same language, thankfully, to talk about these kind of people. But I think I'm going to draw it to an end now because I'm going to go and cough soon. Was Dieppe truly a lesson learned for Overlord? No, that's only what people are saying post-event. Dieppe was not anything to do with learning lessons for Overlord. Yes, clearly, as a result of it, things were learned that could be used to do with Overlord. But that's a trope, I believe, used that's the reason that the Dieppe was worth it, because we learned stuff Overlord. Dieppe was not worth it for just that. Dieppe, we've discussed it before. I believe it was a pinch raid. It was all about Enigma. I fully adhere to David O'Keefe's theory. It didn't work, and in the end, the Allies got their 4-rotor Enigma machine anyway a few weeks later, so it didn't end up having the calamitous outcome of it. But the Dieppe Overlord connection is a modern thing that should be just moved on from, really. But I'm gonna end it now, because I know some of you, there's still, I'm scrolling through, there's so many more questions, but I'm just getting a bit knackered, frankly. So I'm gonna stop in a minute. So in fact, I'm gonna stop now. That's it. I'm gonna bring it to an end now. So yeah, we'll do another one of these at some point. But it's been great talking to you, and thank you for the questions. And I wasn't on my best form today because I've got this nagging cough and cold that I've had for a couple of weeks, but it'll go away. So there we are. So just as a last final kind of request is, if you have been following me, if you have been watching a lot of my content, please just consider becoming a member of the channel. Please consider becoming a patron. $5 a month shouldn't make much difference. I know we're facing lots of hardships this winter. I know there's the gas bills are going up. I know people's mortgages. I know all that. I know that. I'm very sympathetic to all of that. But $2 a month from you, $5 a month from you to me, wouldn't make much difference to you. But if 100 more of you do it, that's a huge difference to me. And it means I can just keep on going into the winter with more confidence about the future. So 1 or 2 new people have signed up as patrons in the last hour or so, which is very nice. But yeah, I don't think that €2 doesn't make a difference, because it does. I think over 578 patrons or something, and it's quite a lot of them just give that €2, and that's fine. Some people give the 25 euros or dollars. That's great. Some people give more than that. But the more people that support me a little bit, the more confidence I have going into the future. Because as I said earlier, it is an insane amount of time I spend doing this and putting stuff on YouTube. You accept the fact, as Brad knows from On This Day in Canadian military history, that a lot of people, 99% of the people who watch me, will never support me financially at all. And I accept that. That's how YouTube works. I don't support many other people on YouTube because I don't watch much. So every one of you who makes that effort to go, you know what, Woody, I will give you $5 a month, it is making a huge difference, because 99% of the people who watch all of my content will not do so. They won't go and they won't help. And that's fine. I get that. But those of you who can afford to, please just consider becoming a patron. But I'm not being all melodramatic. I mean, I'm having a great life and I enjoy doing it. And if it stays as it is, I'm still doing okay. But a few more patrons would be really fantastic. That's it. I'm going to leave it with you. I'm off for the weekend, and then Monday we have 2 shows coming your way. We have Dr. Jilly Carr coming on at whatever time it is, 2:00 UK time, talking about the deportations of the Channel Islands. And she has just been in Germany, or is still in Germany right now, I think, commemorating those Jersey Channel Islanders, I think, who were deported to Germany and been there for anniversary events. And she's with me. And then Eric Lee is on in the evening on the 80th anniversary of Operation Basalt, the commando raid to Sark. So we have 2 more Channel Island shows, and then the rest of the week is catching up shows that were postponed and delayed because of various reasons. So Race of Aces, Kamikaze Hunters, and there's another show or 2 that I've forgotten what they are next week. But anyway, so there we are. I'm going to love you and leave you. Thank you very much for watching. It's Paul Woodadge from World War II TV saying I'll see you for normal content on Monday. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for your great questions, and apologies for those I didn't get round to, but I'm just getting tired now. Cheers, everybody. Bye.